All right. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're having an absolutely phenomenal week. And welcome to right here. We're in the beginning of March here. We're already getting through and essentially entering the second quarter, right? Anything that we start putting into escrow right now, it's going to be closing. Anything that we've opened this month will likely close within the second quarter of the year. So today we're going to do things a little bit differently. I hope we're still good. Of course, we're going to go through market trends like we usually do, but I want to visit a little bit some of the tips that Gary Keller talked about during the vision speech last week. So I hope that some of you had an opportunity to watch Gary Keller's vision speech. I think when he spends some time really digging into the numbers and helping you have a little bit more of an understanding of what exactly is going on in the market, that is so important for us to kind of see that this tale of two markets that we've been seeing, how that then comes down and impacts you as the real estate agent. And so there's a couple action steps that he gave that I want to make sure that we talk about today. The first of those was learning to be the economist of choice, right? And so what does that mean when we talk about being the local economist of choice? I think that's so important. When we listen to a presentation like what Gary gave and he's exploring the state of the US economy, how that impacts the housing market, how factors like unemployment, the GDP inflation, as well as inventory are going to impact our market, it's important for us to have an understanding of how do we talk about that with the client. It's part of why we do the weekly market update every single week, right? We look at the same numbers again and again and again. Why? So that we can help you understand and speak the language of real estate, right? The language that your clients want to know that you understand and know that you know. And that's a big reason that we do that. So as we kind of jump into the local economist of choice, I'm going to start off jumping right into our slides this morning so that we can get through this part of it. And then we're going to go back and kind of revisit some of the numbers that Gary went over during his presentation this week. So let me go ahead and jump right in to our slides this morning. And let's go to awesome. Thumbs up if you can see the slides, okay? Beautiful. Awesome. So jumping right in, again, we're always going to review showing time data. We know that as we look at our showing time data here, we can see, of course, two pieces here. We're looking at our baseline, which was 2019, and then 2020, where we started as we kind of enter into the 1 year anniversary of the shutdown and everything that was going on with the pandemic. That's where we saw the major dips. Now, as we come in and we're looking at 2021, a couple of things that I just want you to note here. One, we've seen some changes in terms of this chart, right? This is going to look a little different. So we want to kind of just track where we're seeing the baseline, where we saw a major drop. We're kind of coming up to that week, right? And what we've seen across the board here is we've seen for the most part some consistency. If you look at the numbers right here on this weekly average, 21.5 compared to where we were in 2020, which was about a 20.7 increase. So that's not too big of a spread just yet. I think we're going to be more interested to see once we hit the next 2 weeks, which is where we saw some major dips in 2021, is where we're going to start to see kind of what the baseline for 2020 is looking like for us. So just important for us to kind of pay attention to that as we look at that showing time data and the increase of showings because we have so many buyers in the market. Looking at our pricing trends, right? Looking at our pricing trends, we evened out this week for Los Angeles County, right over here. So you can see when we look at our under contract, we were at 700K in the last week in Los Angeles County. Our sold was at 700K in Los Angeles County. And our new inventory that came on the market dipped a little from the prior 2 weeks. We are again at 700K. So overall, when we're looking at those pricing trends, if we look at the last 12 weeks to the 12 to 24 weeks prior, We've seen an increase in under contract pricing of about 2.9%. That's about $19,000 week over week, meaning that properties are going under contract about 19K higher in the last 12 weeks than they were in the 12 to 24 weeks prior, right? So we're almost coming and rounding about at the end of the first quarter, which means what we're kind of looking at is the majority of the first quarter compared to the fourth quarter of last year. When we look at our sold inventory, right, we are up 0.8% when we look at pricing. That accounts for about 5,200, right? Meaning that sold properties are selling about $5,200 more within the last 12 weeks than they were in the 24 weeks prior. And when we look at new inventory coming on the market, that means what are properties being priced at in Los Angeles County when they're coming on the market? We are up 1%, which accounts for a little bit less than $7,000, right? So not a major price increase in terms of the new inventory that's coming on the market. Again, where we're still seeing the steady price increase is in under contract, right? So people are pricing strategically to drive prices up during this under contract point as well. So we just want to keep an eye on that area as we are looking at pricing out different listings. Now, looking at our inventory trends for Los Angeles County, we can see that our under contract within the last week, it dipped slightly from the previous week. That's going to be our blue bar here, right? It dipped a little bit. We see that we had 1,204 homes that went under contract in Los Angeles County within the last week. Sold inventory, we had 1,049 homes that sold within the last week in Los Angeles County. And new inventory, this we can see there was a slight uptick week over week, right? Very slight here. It's almost even, but it's a slight uptick week over week. We had 1,301 homes that came on the market in Los Angeles County within the last week. Overall, we are down in our under contract inventory 5.2%. We are down 14.7% across the board for sold inventory that is selling overall. And right, we're looking at what went under contract in this period, which is why we saw a couple little dips in our sold right over here. And then new inventory, right? New inventory, Los Angeles County as a whole is down 14.9% in new inventory. This is something we've continued to watch as a trend overall, and we'll talk about that when we talk a little bit about what Gary talked about in his presentation. But in reality, we're seeing a couple different factors that are playing out, contributing to our low inventory. Everything from because of that low inventory, we see people that are hesitant to even put their listings on the market because they're concerned about where they're going to go or where they're going to move to. We see some issues as well, where although the rates themselves are so low, we have so much that is still in forbearance in some type of moratorium that's kind of on hold right now. So as we've seen those extensions continue on the moratorium, we've seen the impact that has on the inventory as well. As we look at Orange County, right, and we start looking at our Orange County pricing trends here, we can see that in Orange County, our under contract pricing was at 860, right? 860,000 within the last week. That was a little bit of an increase from the previous week. And that's actually the highest that it's been. If you go ahead and review and look at the blue bars, right? That is the highest under contract price point that we've been at within the last 24 weeks. For sold inventory, right, we're seeing pricing at 825K, 825,000, and new inventory at 870,000. Again, right here, we're pretty similar to what we have kind of seen in the last couple of weeks, but it's also much higher than it was if we look at the 12 to 24 weeks prior. So when we start looking at that as a trend overall, we can see that our under contract pricing is up 4.4%. That means that properties are selling about $34,000 more in the last 12 weeks than they were in the 12 to 24 weeks prior. When we look at our sold inventory, we're selling 2.8% higher, which at this higher price point accounts for a little bit more than 21,000 more in the last 12 weeks than in the 12 to 24 weeks prior. And as we're looking at our new pricing, right? So properties that are coming on the market, they're being priced approximately 3.7% higher in the last 12 weeks than they were the 12 to 24 weeks prior. That accounts for a spread of a little bit above 29,000, right? So meaning that properties right now are about $29,000 higher in Orange County specifically than they were in the last in the end of the year, in that fourth quarter of the year, right? So this, again, we want to make sure that we're watching this when we are pricing property, when we're looking at properties in the different counties. We want to make sure that we're monitoring these trends, because this is also going to inform how we're pricing property so that we can price ahead of the market. When we go into our inventory trends, right? In inventory overall, we saw about 785 homes go under contract in Orange County last week, 666 homes sold in Orange County last week, and new inventory, we had 668 homes that hit the market in Orange County last week, a little bit of a dip from the previous week. So we've seen that kind of dip down overall. When we start looking at the last 12, and one thing I want you guys to note here, right? Even though we did see a little bit of a dip here, we are still seeing higher numbers than we were right at the end of the year, right? Right at the end of the year is where we saw the biggest dips. Of course, that accounts for our holiday season and everything that's going on. So this, I don't want you guys to take, when we start looking at low inventory, this to mean low opportunity, right? There still is absolutely opportunity. It's just we need to get very creative about going out and creating our own inventory. When we look at under contract, the overall in Orange County is down about 6.6%. That means about it's that because Orange County is a smaller county, the numbers that counted are going to be a little bit smaller. That accounts for about 46 properties that were down every single week in the last 12 weeks compared to the 12 to 24 weeks prior, right? In Orange County across the board. When we look at sold inventory, right? Sold inventory is down 19.4%, right? So that means there's 148 properties less selling every single week in the last 12 weeks, the 12 to 24 weeks prior. And new inventory is down 9.9, almost 10%. That accounts for about 72 properties every single week compared to this period here. Of course, a couple things that I want to note, because I think right now, since we're starting to get more of a look at the fourth quarter of the year, as well as the first quarter of the year, as we kind of round out towards the end of March and hit this midway point during March. What we usually find is that in the fourth quarter and the first quarter is when overall seasonality comes into play, specifically in these counties, right? So this is not going to apply if you're looking at more of like a vacation home type area or things like that. But seasonality tends to come into play in the fourth and first quarter. Now, when we look at the trends, 2020 has been a little bit of an anomaly. Numbers were a little bit higher, and we can see that right here. If we're looking at September and October, numbers were a little bit higher in the fourth quarter across the board when we look at all four counties than they usually would be in the fourth quarter of the year. This was a result of pent-up demand. Okay, so what we saw in 2020 was that the major dip that occurred was when? The second quarter. The second quarter tends to actually be a high production quarter across the board for the real estate industry. Now, in general, we saw a dip across the board in the second quarter of the year, and that demand was released in the third and fourth quarter, meaning we had a little bit of an inflated demand and inflated production compared to what the trends usually indicate in the third and fourth quarter of the year. So when we look at this and we start seeing that we're down, now I will say this, when it comes to inventory is 100% down. We've never seen an inventory market like this. But I also, when we're looking at trends, right, we always want to inspect what we're expecting. So I want you guys to kind of understand why these numbers look a little bit higher than they may usually within that fourth quarter of the year. as we're kind of rounding out towards the end of that. So let me go ahead and pop over to our Riverside County pricing trends. When we start looking at Riverside County, so our price point starts going down a little bit here. We can see that under contract, right? Under contract Riverside County last week held steady at about 450,000. We did see a little bit of an increase in sold, right? A little bit of an increase in sold. That is going to account for the pricing was at about 472,000, and new inventory that came on the market has held steady from last week, right? We can see that that's an identical bar here in our red bar at 450K. So we did not see prices go up week over week. We saw them go down slightly from about 3 weeks ago. Overall, when we're looking at these last 12 weeks compared to the 12 to 24 prior, we can see that our under contract pricing is up 1.5% across the board in Riverside County. That accounts for a little bit more than $6,000 above what it was 12 to 24 weeks ago. Sold pricing up 2.3%. That's a little bit over $10,000, right? A little bit over $10,000 above what it was. And then new pricing. So we have seen a slight increase in pricing here of about 1.4%. That's a little bit less than $6,000, right? $5,980,000, meaning that prices are about $5,900 higher, almost $6,000 higher in the last 12 weeks compared to where they were the 12 to 24 weeks prior. So moving into our inventory again, we're seeing very similar trends. We can see our biggest dips were around the holidays here, but under contract, we had 610 properties go under contract in Riverside County last week, 526 properties sold in Riverside County last week, and 578 homes came on the market in Riverside County last week. Overall, right, we're under contract is down 4.7%. That's about 28 properties week over week. Sold inventory, this is a bigger influx here, but sold inventory down 17.8% in Riverside County, right? 17.8%. That's over 100 properties every single week, right? Compared to the 12 to 24 weeks prior. New inventory, almost 100 properties down every single week, right? 100 properties less every single week compared to the 12 to 24 weeks prior. That's down 14.7% in Riverside County. Jumping over to San Bernardino, right? And one thing I want to note, let me go back to this really quickly. So we can see that this is a pretty big dip, right? We can also see we had a little bit of a price increase. So what happens? Inventory declines, right? So the law of supply and demand, inventory declines. We're always going to see that reflected a little bit in terms of our pricing. So we just want to kind of keep an eye on that. Jumping into San Bernardino County, under contract. So again, our lowest price county, right? San Bernardino County. Did I hear a question coming in? Oh, nope, no worries. Under contract. So we see property under contract, 399. So $399,000 is the inventory that went under contract in San Bernardino County this past week. Our sold pricing, $410,000, right? $410,000 for anything that went sold in San Bernardino County last week. That's about the median there. A slight increase from the previous week. So we can see that's going to reflect our under contract over here, right? We see increases in under contract that come in, and that plays out a little bit later. And then new inventory, we see properties coming in. 405,000 was the median price point for new properties that came on the market last week in San Bernardino County. When we look overall at our trends in the last 12 weeks compared to the 12 to 24 prior, we are up 1.1% on under contract pricing. That's a little bit more than $4,000, meaning that properties are going under contract about $4,000 higher in the last 12 weeks compared to the 12 to 24 weeks prior. Up 1.2% in sold inventory, that's about 4,500, and new inventory almost 6,000 at 1.5%. meaning properties are being priced about $6,000 higher in San Bernardino County than the 12 to 24 weeks prior. Looking at our inventory, right? Looking right and jumping right into our inventory here as well. So I want you to look at these trends a little bit as well, because we can see, sorry guys. There we go. Okay. We can see a bit of a dip that I want you guys to look at right here. This is a bit more of it. We had seen a big increase last week when we looked at our sold inventory that dipped again. So we always know 1 week does not make a trend. We want to kind of see what that's looking like. But we know that sold, right? Sold, which is our green bar, is reflective of what was going on over here. So under contract was lower, right? As we rounded out towards the end of the year, we're seeing that reflected in lower sold inventory right over here as well. So under contract, 538 homes went under contract in San Bernardino County last week. A little bit of a dip from the previous couple weeks. Sold inventory, 473 homes sold within the last week in San Bernardino County, and 588 homes hit the market in San Bernardino County within last week. Of course, overall, still a record low inventory across the board in all 4 counties. When we look at our trends, right, it's down 2.8% in under contract inventory compared to, as we rounded out the fourth quarter. The same thing, sold inventory down 14.2%. This is a bigger spread here of that sold inventory, again, reflecting what was going on with under contract right over here. And then new inventory is down 10.5% across the board. That means there's about 63 properties less hitting the market every single week compared to the 12 to 24 weeks prior. So that's kind of looking at our inventory trends across the board. A couple things I really want to talk about, and this is going to be important for us to kind of have an understanding of, that Gary talked about during his revisiting of the stats, right? One of the things that he said was this. He said, if you understand the numbers, you will have a sense of how the economy is going. And you will be able to sit down with your buyers and sellers and be the economist of choice, right? And be the economic authority of choice. That's one of the things that we have to have complete clarity of, is what is happening in our market and how does this play into impacting our clients? Not just when we look at things like the inventory trends, but a couple of the numbers and the stats that he really wanted to cover and went over is unemployment, right? Unemployment is going to be a big part of this. One thing that we know to be true is when we look at a healthy unemployment rate is below 6%, is what's considered a healthy unemployment rate, okay? Prior to the pandemic, so approximately a year ago, because we're just rounding out on the year anniversary of the pandemic coming into play, and I think next week or the next 2 weeks is about when we saw the majority of the shutdown, at least here in California, right? The United States unemployment was at about 3.5%. Okay, so if a healthy unemployment rate is about 6%, and we were at about 3.5%, that's considered a very healthy unemployment rate. Excuse me, which during the highest point of the pandemic, which was about April or so, that ballooned to about 14.8%. That's huge, right? Way above what we would consider a healthy employment rate. At the end of 2020, as we ended the year, the unemployment rate overall was about 6.7%. So that's slightly above what we would consider a healthy unemployment rate within the United States. Now, this is where we start looking at things a little bit differently. And this is why we see, this is part of the reason why we see so much demand right now in the market as it pertains to buyers, is because there's two things going on in this market, right? When we look at that unemployment rate, it's one thing when we look at it in generalities, it's another when we start looking at it a little bit more specifically. So to put that into perspective, even though the unemployment rate at the end of 2020 was about 6.7%, which is just above what's considered a healthy employment rate, those in the financial sector specifically, right, are nearly back to full employment with only a 3.4% unemployment rate. Whereas those in industries like leisure and hospitality, right, are at about a 16% unemployment rate, 10% above what would be considered a healthy unemployment rate. So what does that mean? It means we're having two very different experiences as we look at the economy. There's two very different groups of people that are going through two very different things, right? And when we look at the fact that about 78% of home purchases are age 35 plus, which account for the industries that are experiencing the lowest rate of unemployment, that's why part of the reason why we've experienced such a boom in buyers entering the market. Now you pair that with mortgage rates being at an all-time low, right? At the end of 2020, they had hit a low of about 3.11%. When we look at the average, right? We're looking at the average nationally compared to the historical average, which is a little bit over 6%, about 6.07%. Okay. So interest rates very low, low rates of unemployment in the industries that account for age 35 plus. So this is where demographics play into this, which accounts for the majority of the buyers, about 78% of the buyers that are currently in the market, right? That are currently in the market. Now, here's the thing that becomes an issue is now then we have the impact of home prices and affordability, right? Right now, we're seeing that there was about, in 2020, there was about a 9% price appreciation in prices, in home prices, annual appreciation. To put that in perspective, in 2019, home prices appreciated at about 4.8%. That's almost double, right? So what happens? Supply and demand comes into play. We all of a sudden have all these very unique factors that came into play, and increased demand because interest rates sustained so low, specifically, which supported the demographics that experienced, a little bit of a boom and weren't experiencing financial issues. And so we've seen home prices continue to continue to increase, continue to appreciate. So it's going to be something that is really important for us to kind of look at. We also, there was some things he talked about in terms of just monitoring inflation and what that looks like. Right now, a healthy inflation rate is considered about 2%. There's some concern that as we look at these different economic relief packages that are coming into play, is how will that impact, how might that impact inflation? What is that going to look like overall? We'll see that play out over the next year or so. And yet in reality, if we really look at it, the government, the Federal Reserve, is a little bit more concerned with deflation and making sure that we can sustain the economy right now. So that may not be a factor that we're looking at, but it's important to kind of have that understanding of it as well. So the first thing and the first tip or action that he talked about is being that local economist of choice, right? Understanding those numbers and understanding what's happening in the market and how that's impacting your buyers and sellers, right? Number two. So one, be the local economist of choice. Number two, keep your lead generation consistent. Okay? When we look at the Shift book, and we've read the Shift book, we've talked about the Shift book, I'm going to be revisiting a lot more of the concepts from Shift again, because I think that it's important for us to always continue to review what Shift talks about, right? It talks about consistency in our lead generation, and sometimes even doubling down on our lead generation, right? There is this idea that if we keep our lead generation consistent, the timing will find you. What does that mean, right? Is that when we stop lead generating, and because we think either maybe you're in the boat that you're experiencing a boom in terms of your market. Maybe you have a lot of clients that are reaching out to you right now because they're all looking at the interest rates and they're like, hey, I want to get in the market right now. Or maybe you're on the other end of the boat, right? Maybe you feel like your clients are all wanting to wait. They're all wanting to hold, right? It can be very tempting to take your foot off the gas pedal in either one of those scenarios. In scenario one, it's, hey, I have a ton of business right now, and so I can afford to take my foot off the gas pedal. Or in scenario two, hey, you know what? It's too hard right now. I'm going to take a break until the market gets easier. This is when we talk about lead maturity, right? When we talk about lead maturity, if we do not consistently fill our pipeline with leads at any point, we have to stop valuing a lead by how close they are to making a purchase. I'm going to say that again. We have to stop valuing a lead by how close they are to making a purchase. Because in reality, when we look at the lifetime of a lead, every single lead has the opportunity to not only give us their own purchases and those repetitive purchases that they may have over the years, but also the referrals, the people in their network, right? This is why we want to make sure we're consistent with feeding our database and nurturing our database. Here's why, is that all of a sudden something could change in the market and everybody's raising their hand and saying, I want to go buy now, or I want to sell now, right? The moratoriums could get lifted and all of a sudden everybody wants to sell, right? Or whatever that might happen. If you are not the agent that's in front of them and has been consistent with them and is top of mind with them at that point, then we have the law of emotional proximity, right? They're going to go with whoever that first person to help them out is. This is what happens. And I want to give you guys a realistic example of how this works, that what the idea of emotional proximity is, okay? When you go into a clothing store, not during the pandemic, of course, but before the pandemic, right? When you go into a clothing store and you're looking, I don't know, let's say you're looking for some clothes and somebody comes up to you and they say, oh, how can I help you? What do we say? Oh, I'm just looking, right? I'm just looking, even though we walked into the store for something, right? Now, that particular person, okay, we move along in the store, we go into the store, we find some items we want to try on, and all of a sudden we need to find somebody to open the fitting room. Guess what? I don't know about you, but I'm not going to try to find the first person that greeted me when I walked into the store. They're not top of mind for me unless they were following me around the store, right? Or being extremely attentive. They're not top of mind for me. I'm going to the first person I can find that can open the fitting room. That's the law of emotional proximity. That's part of what happens in real estate. And that's why we need to be consistent in our lead generation. We need to be consistent in our follow-up and nurturing our leads. Because when that moment strikes, the law of emotional proximity comes into effect. And if you are not the person that is top of mind for your prospects, then they're not true leads in your database or contacts in your database. There's just somebody that you happen to connect with. And they might go to someone else, right? So that's why we want to make sure that number 2, we're keeping our lead generation consistent and the timing will find us. Number 3, lead generate for listings, right? Lead generate for listings. You always, always, always want to make sure that you are continuing to have at least one focus for lead generation that is seller focused, right? One arm of your lead generation technique must be seller focused. Here's the thing, right? And in 2020 was a crazy year, right? In terms of just the market in general. There was a huge amount of home sales, right? There was a huge amount of home sales. And yet we are sitting on the lowest inventory ever recorded. Okay. Here's the thing. We have a couple different things that have happened. We have moratoriums that are in place, right? We have all these different moratoriums around eviction and around foreclosure. So even though people are experiencing financial difficulty, they're kind of sitting in there's a bubble right now, not a bubble, but there is a protection around those properties not necessarily coming on the market. We also have the impact that happens when all of a sudden people feel like they have nowhere to go, right? Because there's no inventory. That has a twofold effect. Even though people want to list their properties, there's no properties for them to buy, in their opinion. And we have this huge amount of competition that's going on. Now, what we know is that this does not mean there is low opportunity, right? It simply means that we have to explore other areas of the market. So we figure out what are the markets of the moment that we need to be looking at. Now, later this month, launching on the 23rd, we're going to be introducing a new program for you guys. You will have a bridge program option, right? A bridge program option, as well as an instant offers option, meaning you can go to your listing presentation and offer your clients 3 options. 1, that they can list their properties on the open market, right? Just the way we always do. Number 2, that they can get an instant offer on their home. And number 3, that they can get a premium bridge product. What does that mean? It means if they are looking for a replacement home, what if you could give them an offer, sell their home, and they could stay in the home and rent back until they find their replacement home? But now cash in hand, right? So that their future offer is not contingent. We know that now is the time to get creative. You guys will have that launched out on the 23rd. So keep an eye on that. We're going to be talking about that a lot next week. On the 16th, we're having a meeting and we will be introducing it, and it should be in your hands on the 23rd, my friends. But that we want to, number 3 is lead generate for listings. Number 4, stay in relationship with your sphere of influence. Stay in relationship with your sphere of influence. What we find is that 88% of home buyers and 89% of sellers in 2020 used a real estate agent. I know there's a percentage there of people that did not. That has absolutely gone up from past years. We are definitely seeing more iBuyers entering the market as well. But 88% of home buyers and 89% of sellers used an agent. Yet, only 13% of those buyers in 2020 and 26% of sellers indicated that they found their agent because they worked with them previously. Wow, right? We want to make sure. A lot of times what happens is people say, I will use the same agent, and then the agent disappears and they never hear from their agent again, right? And they're not in the network with the agent. And so they don't use the same agent because the law of emotional proximity comes into place, right? So you want to make sure that you are staying in relationship with your sphere, that when you're lead generating, you're putting people in your database, and that you are meaningfully touching that database on a regular basis, right? And the last one, number 5, share your value proposition again and again and again, right? Share your value proposition consistently. What is the value that you offer to a client? As we see things like Zillow offers and the Zillow Zestimate offer and all these new things that are entering the market, right? We really need to make sure that we are consistently sharing your value proposition, not just being the local economist of choice, right? But what do we have to compete against Zillow? Well, a couple things, right? The instant offer program that we're going to be launching for you guys will be one element of your value proposition, but also the technological experience that you are able to give your clients. If you are using your home app, right? Are you using the tools that you have at your disposal to create a unique experience for your clients, to make life easier for them, to create more convenience while also giving them direct access to you, right? While also giving them that human touch. So making sure you are consistently, right? Consistently sharing your value proposition, right? So we went through that was a lot that we went through today on top of what we usually go through, learning to be the economist of choice, making sure that you keep your lead generation consistent so that we can make sure that that's powerful around the law of emotional proximity. The timing will find you. Lead generating for listings, right? Staying in relationship with your sphere, and sharing your value proposition proudly and consistently. A lot of information today, you guys, and I will make sure that I share out those slides for you guys to use as well. We also have the vision slides that are available. I had uploaded them into the hub as well, so you guys will have access to that. I have a lot on the calendar for this coming week on the 16th, right? On the 16th, please mark your calendars for 2 p.m. We have a couple things that we're going to be introducing as well as celebrating, right? But we have a couple things we'll be introducing, as well as that seller concierge program and a phenomenal follow-up program that we put in place for you guys as well. And then we are also on, more than likely, and I will share this out on the 23rd, we'll do a full training on that seller program for you guys once it launches out and we can get it into your hands. And then on the last week of March, right? The last week of March, we are going to have an amazing takeover by our friend, Mr. Derek Oy. Derek is a millionaire real estate agent. His team grossed over $4 million in gross commission income last year. Okay. In GCI, 411 homes sold. And he's going to share what he does with his team on a daily basis, right? Exclusive for you guys. So we're really excited about that. But keep an eye. We have a couple of those things coming out on the calendar that you do not want to miss, my friends. All right. With that, I hope you guys have an absolutely phenomenal rest of your day. Happy International Women's Day from yesterday. We love all of you, and we're super honored to be in business with each and every one of you, and my gentlemen as well. But this month is about the women, so we're really excited, and I want to wish you all an absolutely happy International Women's Day. With that, I hope you guys have a great day. Oh, I see a hand raised. Question? Come on down, my friend.
Is that me?
Yes.
Okay, quick question, Monica. Going back to showing time, I know that that's in the works with the Zillow purchasing that. Is there an alternative company that's out there that you know of? Because I definitely, once the switch is official, if it does in fact take place, I'm going to stop using them.
Yeah. So what's really interesting with what's going on with showing time. So CRMLS and the MLS and everything, they released a statement talking about the privacy guidelines and all of those different things. And but I completely understand the concern. I feel it's a conflict of interest in my personal opinion. So I am of the same opinion. There are a couple different platforms that are out there. Here's the difficult part. With those platforms, they don't necessarily have the same partnership that Showing Time does, right? So Showing Time is currently already integrated into the MLS, meaning that for a new platform to really be something that is adopted on a large scale, of course, we can use different platforms ourselves, but for a new platform to really be something that's launched out at a large scale, this is something that I very much recommend being brought out to the boards. There is one in particular, and I'm so sorry, the name eludes me. So what I'll do is I'll look it up, and I will make sure that we talk about it this coming week. And then on the next session that we have, I'll make sure that I review it again, because I know there's about 2 other platforms that I've heard of so far that do something very similar to Showing Time. But again, they don't necessarily have the same MLS partnerships right now. For everyone, I highly recommend, express your concerns at the association and MLS levels as well, right? Because they are the ones that essentially are making these larger decisions about what we continue to use as members of the MLS and the California Association of Realtors and the National Association of Realtors. And so I 100%, feel the concern. I will look up what those platforms are, Jen, but that's kind of the challenge that we would face on it. But that's a great question, guys. And I will note, right, keep an eye on what Zillow is doing. We're going to keep talking about that. You guys know we spend a lot of time talking about what's happening as it relates to technology and what that impact is for you guys. And this is part of the reason why we're offering this seller concierge service for you, right? Is we want to put a tool in your hand that helps you combat against what Zillow is doing in the market right now, not just with Showing Time, but with their all of the acquisitions that they're currently, making, and that entire kind of ecosystem that they're cultivating and creating right now. The other thing that I want to ask, I did have an agent on Thursday that let me know that she went to go open a property with Supra. It happened to be a property that was listed by Zillow, and that she was prompted to then download the Zillow app in order to access the property, that the Supra did not actually unlock the box to allow her in. If I don't have the address on that property, if that is the case and you find that as you're going out to properties, please take a picture for me, send me the address of the property, because if it is indeed a violation of Supra guidelines or MLS guidelines, because we have to, as MLS subscribers, we give each other access to properties regardless of brokerage. If there is something that's circumventing Supra guidelines, I'd like to know about it so that we can issue a complaint against it. Right? Is that is something that is a concern if that is happening in a large scale. And so we want to make sure, you know, if you guys are experiencing that we have kind of that documentation and we can move that forward. So keep an eye on that, you guys. We're hearing it. We're also hearing that any of the Zillow properties, that the offers need to be submitted via dot loop, and that they were asking for the client's information to be submitted prior to even seeing the property in some cases, which is a little bit of a concern as well. And so we're looking at all of that, but just, I want you guys to be aware. And if you encounter any of those things during your showings, please, please, please let me know right away, right, as well. With that, I know I want to give you guys some time to go grab coffee before you jump into contracts class with Ed. But with that, I hope you guys have an absolutely phenomenal rest of your day, and I will talk with you soon.
Thank you, Monica.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Monica.
Absolutely, my friend.